Feeding tubes, she had no idea who she was messing with. As Sophia cried, asking how she would eat, I made a silent promise. Being a federal judge wasn't just my profession, it was about to become her worst nightmare. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more Karen stories. Stop. Those are my daughter's feeding tubes. I shouted as I ran into my daughter's bedroom. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A woman with blonde hair and an angry face was in my house. She had two big men with her. They were taking my daughter's medical supplies and putting them in trash bags. My name is Mike and I am a federal judge. But right now I was just a scared dad. My 12-year-old daughter Sophia sat in her wheelchair crying. She was born with a condition that means she can't eat normal food. She needs a feeding tube to live. Get out of my house, my wife Anna screamed, trying to grab the bags from the men. The blonde woman held up a paper. I'm Mrs. Winters from the HOA. Your medical equipment breaks our rules. No medical things can be seen from outside. It makes our neighborhood look bad. My daughter will die without those tubes. I yelled, my hands shaking with anger. Mrs. Winters smiled coldly. Not my problem. You signed the HOA rules when you moved in. One of the men dumped out a drawer of Sophia's backup supplies onto the floor. Daddy, I'm scared, Sophia cried, her thin face wet with tears. How will I eat? Please, I begged, trying to stay calm. Those supplies cost thousands of dollars. The insurance won't replace them for a month. You should have thought about that before breaking the rules, Mrs. Winters said. She looked at her watch. We're done here. The men finished taking all of Sophia's feeding tubes and formula. The cabinet where we kept her supplies was empty. This is illegal, I said, my voice shaking. I will fight this. Mrs. Winters laughed. Good luck. The HOA has good lawyers. She didn't know I was a federal judge with 15 years of experience. She thought I was just a regular dad she could bully. After they left, Sophia looked at me with scared eyes. Dad, I'm hungry. When can I eat? My heart broke. I held her small body close while my wife called the doctor in a panic. I promise I'll fix this, sweetheart, I told her. And Mrs. Winters will be very sorry she did this to you. My son Jake, who was 14, came into the room. He had seen everything. Dad, can they really take Sophia's medical stuff? He asked, his face pale with shock. I looked at my scared family and felt a rage I had never known before. In court, I was always fair and calm. But now, someone had hurt my child. No, Jake, I said. What they did was against the law in many ways. And I'm going to make sure they pay for it. Daddy, I'm scared, Sophia cried, her thin face wet with tears. How will I eat? Please, I begged, trying to stay calm. Those supplies cost thousands of dollars. The insurance won't replace them for a month. You should have thought about that before breaking the rules, Mrs. Winters said. She looked at her watch. We're done here. The men finished taking all of Sophia's feeding tubes and formula. The cabinet where we kept her supplies was empty. This is illegal, I said, my voice shaking. I will fight this. Mrs. Winters laughed. Good luck. The HOA has good lawyers. She didn't know I was a federal judge with 15 years of experience. She thought I was just a regular dad she could bully. After they left, Sophia looked at me with scared eyes. Dad, I'm hungry. When can I eat? My heart broke. I held her small body close while my wife called the doctor in a panic. I promise I'll fix this, sweetheart, I told her. And Mrs. Winters will be very sorry she did this to you. My son Jake, who was 14, came into the room. He had seen everything. Dad, can they really take Sophia's medical stuff? He asked, his face pale with shock. I looked at my scared family and felt a rage I had never known before. In court, I was always fair and calm. But now, someone had hurt my child. No, Jake, I said. What they did was against the law in many ways. And I'm going to make sure they pay for it. We had moved to this neighborhood 6 months ago because the schools were good for kids with special needs. The house was perfect for Sophia. 1 floor, wide doors for her wheelchair, and a nice backyard. It was supposed to be our safe place. But Mrs. Winters had been giving us trouble since day one. She complained about the special van that dropped Sophia off from school. She didn't like the ramp we put at our front door. She even complained about the height of our grass when we were at the hospital with Sophia for a week. I spent the next 2 hours making calls. First, I called the hospital and begged for emergency supplies. They could help, but it would cost $3,000 that our insurance wouldn't cover. Next, I called the police. I'm sorry, sir, the officer said. This sounds like a problem between you and your HOA. We can't help unless someone gets hurt. I wanted to scream. My daughter was going to get hurt. She needed to eat. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't know. It showed a picture of Sophia's feeding tubes thrown in a dumpster. The message said, "Violation removed. Neighborhood values protected." HOA. That was it. I was done being nice. I drove to the HOA office near the entrance of our neighborhood. Mrs. Winter's fancy car was in a special parking spot that said, HOA President. The lady at the desk looked up when I walked in. "Judge Ramirez, Mrs. Winters is in a meeting and can't be disturbed. Tell her it's about my daughter's medical equipment," I said in a very quiet, serious voice. "I'm sorry, but..." "Tell her now." Something in my face must have scared her because she picked up the phone right away. A minute later, Mrs. Winters came out of her office. She was wearing expensive clothes and her hair was perfect. She looked like she thought she was better than everyone else. "Judge Ramirez," she said in a cold voice, "I understand you're upset, but rules are rules. Medical equipment that can be seen from the street lowers property values by up to 15%. It's clearly written in Section 7.3 of our community rules." "My daughter's feeding tube was not visible from the street," I said. "It was inside our home, which you entered without permission." She waved her hand like she was brushing away a fly. "We got complaints about medical deliveries. The HOA rules say we can enter and fix violations after a warning. You were warned last week about the delivery trucks." "Those weren't warnings, they were complaints about delivery trucks," I said, trying to stay calm. "My daughter needs that equipment to live. Then maybe you should find a more appropriate neighborhood for your family situation." Her voice was mean. "Oakwood Estates has certain standards. We aren't set up for households with special needs." Her words were so cruel that for a moment I couldn't speak. Then I asked, "Where are my daughter's supplies?" "Thrown away as per the rules. Biohazard materials cannot be kept here." "Those weren't biohazards. They were new, clean medical supplies worth thousands of dollars that my insurance won't replace for another month." She shrugged. "You should have thought of that before breaking our rules. My daughter could die without those supplies." "That sounds like a personal problem, not an HOA issue." She looked at her watch. "Now if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting about unapproved lawn decorations in Section 5. As she started to walk away, I said quietly, "You know what I do for a living, Mrs. Winters?" "Of course. Everyone knows we have a federal judge in our community. It's quite prestigious. Though your family situation is unfortunate. Then you should understand that I know the law very well." She smiled a thin smile. "So do our HOA lawyers." "Good. Tell them to expect to hear from me." I turned to leave, then stopped. "And Mrs. Winters? This isn't over." Back home, I found Anna on the phone with Sophia's doctor, trying to get emergency replacement supplies. Sophia was on the couch, looking pale and tired. "Daddy?" she whispered when she saw me. "Did you get my tubes back?" I knelt beside her. "Not yet, sweetie. But I'm working on it." "I'm hungry," she said in a small voice. Those two words broke my heart and made me more determined than ever. That night, Anna and I took turns watching Sophia. The doctor said she could go without her feeding tube for a few hours, but not much longer. We had to drive to the hospital in the morning for emergency supplies. After we finally got emergency supplies from the hospital, and paid $3,000 that our insurance wouldn't cover, I sat at my desk and began to work. I wasn't just an angry father anymore. I was a federal judge with 15 years of experience and many friends in the legal system. First, I filed an emergency court order against the HOA for breaking the Americans with Disabilities Act, Fair Housing Act, and state laws that protect disabled children. Second, I called the county prosecutor, my old friend, about filing criminal charges against Mrs. Winters for theft, breaking and entering, and endangering a child. Third, I wrote to every family in our neighborhood, telling them exactly what Mrs. Winters had done to Sophia, along with copies of the HOA rules, which as it turned out said nothing about medical equipment or supplies. I worked all night. By morning my phone was ringing non-stop. Other families had stories about Mrs. Winters. She made an old man remove his wheelchair ramp. She fined a family with an autistic child for having special toys in their yard. She yelled at a war veteran for flying an American flag. My courthouse friends were angry too. One judge called and said, "Mike, we're going to make this right." The news found out about our story. HOA takes disabled child's feeding tube, was on TV. Reporters stood outside our neighborhood. Mrs. Winters stopped answering her phone. 3 days later, I stood in a packed courtroom. This time I wasn't the judge. I was a father fighting for his daughter. The real judge was my friend Sarah, who looked at Mrs. Winters with angry eyes. "Mrs. Winters," Judge Sarah said, You took medical equipment from a disabled child. The court orders you to return all supplies immediately and pay for any replacements. Mrs. Winters looked scared now. I was just following HOA rules, she said in a small voice. Your rules don't matter more than a child's life, Judge Sarah said. And the police want to talk to you about theft and child endangerment charges. Mrs. Winters started crying. Now she knew how Sophia felt. When we got home that day, something amazing was happening. Our neighbors were standing in our yard with signs. We support Sophia. Kids come before rules. Medical needs are not violations. Our neighbor Mrs. Chin, who was a lawyer, came up to me. Mike, she said, we've called a special HOA meeting. We're voting out the entire board. And we're changing the rules so this never happens to any family again. Tears filled my eyes. I had wanted revenge against Mrs. Winters. But what we got was even better. We got our community to stand up for what was right. In our kitchen that evening, Sophia sat at the table with her feeding tube properly connected, surrounded by cards, stuffed animals, and gift baskets from neighbors we'd never even met. Dad, she said with a big smile, everyone's being so nice. And guess what? Jenny from across the street has a feeding tube too. Her mom is coming over tomorrow to show us some cool backpacks that hide the supplies. For the first time in days, I felt the tight knot in my chest start to loosen. The next morning, a moving truck appeared outside Mrs. Winters' house. She came out wearing dark sunglasses, head down, hurrying to her car as neighbors watched silently from their driveways. Later that day, the entire HOA board quit. A new committee was formed, led by Mrs. Chen, the lawyer who lived at the end of our street. The criminal case against Mrs. Winters went forward. She pleaded guilty to smaller charges of theft and endangering a child. The judge, who was a mother herself, sentenced her to 2 years of probation, community service at a children's hospital, and classes about disability rights. But the real victory came 6 months later, when our neighborhood became the first in our county to adopt a new inclusive community plan, protecting the rights of residents with disabilities, medical needs, and other differences. Sophia was there for the ceremony, proudly cutting the ribbon on a new playground that all kids could use, even those with special needs. Her feeding tube was visible under her t-shirt, and she didn't try to hide it. Dad, she asked that night as I tucked her into bed, do you think Mrs. Winters learned anything? I thought about how Mrs. Winters looked in court, small, frightened, finally understanding what she had done. I hope so, sweetie. I hope so too, Sophia said thoughtfully. Because you always say justice isn't about punishment. It's about making things right. My daughter was so wise despite, or maybe because of, all she had been through. You know what, Sophia? You'd make a better judge than me. She grinned. Maybe someday. But first I want to be a doctor who helps kids like me. I kissed her forehead. You can be anything you want to be. As I turned off her light, I realized that while I had wanted revenge, what we found instead was something much more valuable. Community, understanding, and change that would help not just Sophia but many others. Sometimes the best victories don't come from defeating our enemies, but from making the world a better place because of what happened. That summer we planted a garden in our front yard, something the old HOA would never have allowed. Sophia sat in her wheelchair, telling us where to plant flowers while neighbors stopped by to help dig in water. In the middle of the garden we put a small sign that said, "Growing kindness, understanding, and acceptance." And on Sophia's window, visible from the street for all to see, hung a beautiful colorful glass suncatcher shaped like a feeding tube, catching the light and throwing rainbows across our lawn. It wasn't a sign of anger, but a reminder that differences should be celebrated, not hidden away. That being vulnerable can make you strong. That sometimes the things that make us different are exactly what bring people together. Every time the sun hits that glass just right, making colors dance across Sophia's face, I remember that real justice isn't found in courtrooms or law books. It's found in the courage of a 12-year-old girl who refused to be ashamed, and in a neighborhood that learned to see with new eyes. Sophia wasn't hiding anymore. And our community was better for it. Last I heard, Mrs. Winters was volunteering at a summer camp for children with disabilities in another state. Maybe there's hope for everyone after all. Sometimes the law works exactly as it should. But sometimes, it takes a child to teach us what justice really means.